One of the reasons you may want to use the Michigan Electronic Library, or MEL, with your students to do research for a project is that the resources in MEL are age appropriate. When you give a third grade student a presentation report on volcanoes, for example, they might go straight to Google and just type in volcanoes. And when they type in volcanoes, they're going to get lots of search results, 5.1 million as a matter of fact. And not surprisingly, the first result that comes up is Wikipedia. So let's take a look at that. So here's our Wikipedia entry for volcanoes. And if we start reading it, we can find a lot of terminology here that is probably a little advanced for a third grader. For example, tectonic plates, mid-Atlantic ridge, convergent tectonic plates. Although this might be factual information, it's not really appropriate for that grade level. So let's take a look at MEL. To get to the Michigan Electronic Library, or MEL, just go to www.mel.org. Now, as I said earlier, these are restricted databases. These are things that the state subscribes to. So when you actually select a MEL database, you will your students, if you're not on this at the school or at a public library, will have to log in, and it's usually the parents will need to log in using their driver's license number or state ID number. So if they're not at a public institution like a public library or a school, they will need to log in. Now, they have been making advances in recognition of IP addresses of where people are, and they may not need to log in. So that's just something to be aware of, that it might require a login if the student is at home. But if you're at your school, you should be able to access the MEL databases. And if you cannot, you may need to have some adjustments to your firewall made, especially if you don't have a media specialist or library on your premises. And so this is something you also need to be aware of. You may need to talk to your tech support people. So having given you that brief introduction to how to access and where you should be able to access MEL, you should be able to access it anywhere that you can have an internet connection, pretty much within the state of Michigan, or if you are outside the state of Michigan, have your identification. So anyway, here is MEL, and we can click on the MEL databases to get to the complete list of both adult and child-centered databases, or we can go to the MEL subject gateways, which have categories based on both topics and age groups, and so I'm going to select kids. So here are the databases that are suggested for kids, and this is generally like K through 7 or 8th grade. So the first thing I'm going to take a look at is the ebook K8 collection. So I'm going to select ebook K8 collection, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in the word volcanoes. This is a selection of online books that are available to students. Again, not available just through the internet. They have to go to the subscription database. And you can see there are a number of books with entries on volcanoes. And the first book is from Science Readers, Forces in Nature. So we can go ahead and click on the ebook full text. And what that does is it takes us to the full text of that particular ebook. There's lots of options here. They can print it, they can resize it, they can look through the table of contents. So if we want to see what makes a volcano, here we're going to find some explanations that are a little bit more oriented to that age group. So it does tell us about plate tectonics, but it also defines it. Gives us some definitions for other terminology. And we can go page by page through this book. Lots of nice visuals. And this probably has the same information um, that Wikipedia does, but at a much better level for a third grader to understand. And this is what makes one of the big differences is its age appropriate resources. Let's try another one. I've gone back to the Kids Gateway, and now I'm going to look at a database called Kids InfoBits. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. This database is a little bit different. Again, it has information you're not going to find on the regular internet, and some things that you will find on the regular internet. But it's been categorized, it's been reviewed, and the nice thing is that you've got these different categories, so you can either have students browse categories if they like, or they can type in a search term. So I typed in volcanoes, and you can see it's sort of given me some options here. And this has lots of other kinds of materials. So this is where you can find items from reference books, like Kid Haven Science Library. I can look at, this is a nice topic overview. So this is kind of nice because this gives sort of, um, it reviews the topic and gives them lots of information, gives them a glossary with terminology, gives them some suggestions for other items, including websites that might be appropriate for their grade level. The other thing it has is magazine articles, so you can look at articles from lots of different magazines. And so, for example, we could look at this Super Science article. It includes Lexile levels, so that can help you judge appropriateness. You can, once you've accessed an article, there's different ways that you can deal with that. They can print it, they can email it, they can get a PDF of the article, which looks exactly as the article did in its original publication. So that's when you could sort of have a talk about what publications are, what makes something a periodical versus just a plain old website. There are newspaper articles, so these are just regular newspapers, generally from USA Today, but still sort of current news. So if there was, for example, a volcano erupting, they could sort of look at some current news on that and isolate that from the big website that would be available for a newspaper. And finally, if it's grayed out, those things don't exist. But for example, if they were doing a country or a geographic area, these types of maps, flags, charts, and graphs, these might be available for the topic. And then finally, we have images. And this is really nice too, because not only are these images available and they are allowed to use them, so you've got you're within copyright, but the other nice thing is that they're cited. So students actually can start thinking about, even at a younger level, start considering, how do I acknowledge where this came from? How do I acknowledge the originator of this information? And so that's something that they can do too. So that is just a brief example of why a MEL database might be a more appropriate resource for students, especially elementary and middle school students, as opposed to just searching the internet generally. Does this mean that you should just completely ignore the internet? No, I don't think so. I think you have to teach both of these things in conjunction with each other and help students make good choices about which source is better for what they are trying to accomplish. And I think that's a really important conversation to start having with students at young ages and continually have all through their academic careers. Because as the landscape of information is changing so quickly, that we need to keep up with that, and we need to make sure that when they do run into information, they understand how they are to consume it and what it means and whether it's appropriate for the task at hand.